The Senate Homeland Security Committee is accusing the nation's top law enforcement agencies and big social media companies of not doing enough to fight domestic terrorism, especially growing threats from white supremacist and anti-government extremists. I want to bring in NBC's Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney with this brand new reporting. Ken, tell us about it.
Well, Hallie, the first thing to note is this is essentially Democrats investigating Democrats. This is the majority of the Homeland Security Committee out with this huge report, 128-page report, criticizing agencies now run by the Biden administration. But they pulled no punches. They said, for example, that they found that the FBI and DHS are continuing to devote more resources to international terrorism than the threat from domestic terrorism, even though officials have been saying for years that domestic terrorism has eclipsed international terrorism as the most dire threat to Americans. And the committee and the investigators also found that the FBI and DHS can't come up with a good data picture of how many domestic terrorism attacks there have been in the United States in a given year, how many arrests, how many cases. It's a muddled picture. They're not keeping the required data according to the committee. Now, the FBI obviously is in the midst of the biggest domestic terror investigation in its history and has done a lot of arrests in the Capitol riot case. But the committee found that before the Capitol riot, domestic terrorism arrests were actually declining by the FBI, even as the threat was metastasizing. Now, in terms of these big social media companies, Meta, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, what the report found is that they have a business model that incentivizes extremist content. They said that these companies have failed to meaningfully address the growth of extremist content on their platforms. Now, the companies are pushing back and said, particularly in the case of Meta, they're saying, no, actually, extremist content is going down. But the committee really dug in deeply here and talked to some of these company executives, and they got the sense that the company's response is to take this content down after it's already spread, rather than taking action in terms of their algorithms to sort of tweak what is put in front of people. Because, you know, all these platforms encourage engagement. Well, what draws engagement? Often the more extreme content is what this committee is finding. And so, unfortunately, Hallie, they don't really have a great answer in terms of how the government could better regulate these social media companies. There's a huge First Amendment issue out there, and nobody's quite willing to say that the government needs to step in and demand action from these companies, Hallie.